is the Moscow bureau chief for the Financial Times. He joins me now from Moscow, and thanks so much for doing so. You write in the FT about Putin's behaviour, quote, being the culmination of a slide into paranoid autocracy that earns comparison with Russia's most brutal rulers. Talk more about that paranoia and how it might play into what we're seeing now.
Well, one thing we're seeing is that Putin has become increasingly isolated in recent years. He was already making decisions in a very tight circle of advisors even before the pandemic hit. And as we saw when he made the president of France, the German chancellor, sit at the other ends of that enormous, just ridiculously huge table in the Kremlin, he goes to these absurd lengths to stop himself getting COVID. And what that means, according to people who know him that I've spoken to, is that the information that he's getting is much more restricted, and he's retreated into himself, and he seems to have really started believing his own hype. It appears that Macron and Schultz from France and Germany, when they met him, basically he just gave them these hours and hours long lectures about his own warped interpretation of history, much like we saw on TV earlier this week when he made his speeches. So it seems that Putin is, if he even is acting rationally, which a lot of people here have started to have doubts that, he may not have all of the information that you and I are seeing. He may be given a very, very different picture of what's happening on the ground.
And of course, one of the big dangers of all of that is there doesn't seem to be anyone around him who will say no to him.
No, I think it was really remarkable. We saw it in that Security Council session on Monday. They had it in the same room where they did the annexation of Crimea. And when he did the annexation of Crimea, if you believe Putin, he stayed up till 7 in the morning with his 4 top security advisors, almost like kind of Politburo in the Communist Party. This time he had a Security Council all sitting 20 feet away from him in this enormous room. And he basically grilled them and forced them to almost dip their hands in blood by endorsing this move on Ukraine. There's a Russian expression that kind of means collective complicity, krugovaya poruka. It really looked like Putin was trying to get everyone to say that they were going in with him almost like this kind of loyalty test. Because a lot of his even his closest, most hawkish advisors, they looked visibly uncomfortable with what Putin was trying to make them do.
The talk of possible talks now, what is your sense of what Mr. Putin would see as his minimum requirements and whether they would even be acceptable to President Zelensky?
I think it's very difficult to tell what Russia's real goal is in calling for these talks, because yesterday you saw after Ukraine said it was willing to put possible neutral status like Finland or Austria have on the table, the Kremlin really ran after that as hard as it could. Putin said he was ready to do it, and I was on a very strange call with Putin's spokesman who seemed quite demonstrably upset that they hadn't managed to agree on a venue for these talks with Ukraine, even as they were bombing the government district, and they were worried that Russia was going to assassinate Ukrainian President Zelensky. But the problem is, firstly, Russia doesn't seem to be serious about negotiations in the sense that you and I think negotiations are where each side is prepared to make a compromise. Russia has made it clear they're only interested in negotiations where they don't make any concessions. Ukraine surrenders and essentially ceases to exist in the form that we know it. The possibility is that, given how things are going on the ground and given the difficulty for Putin of selling a war to Russians, where a lot of Russians die and where they do significant damage on the quote-unquote brotherly nation of Ukraine, it's possible that he might want this to be like the 5-day war in Georgia in 2008, declare victory quickly, establish some new facts on the ground, and then get out. But there's also, you could think about it the other way, given what Putin said. He was complaining about what he said were neo-Nazis setting up artillery in civilian areas in major cities, and you just could read that as preparing the population, given how the tactics already from Russia are so much like what they did in Syria starting in 2015, that they could cities like Kyiv and Kharkiv into Aleppo. So we really don't know where this is going to go. It's been quite clear that Putin's own officials. You've seen the foreign minister and the Kremlin spokesman saying completely opposite things at the same time. It's either they're trying to obfuscate or they don't know themselves what the line is. Only Putin himself really seems to know that at this point.
Yeah, great analysis. Max Seddon in Moscow. Really appreciate you taking the time.